Good morning. So after the high energy presentation of C.J. Coolidge, we're gonna keep it going. I'm gonna introduce our first panel for the day. We're going to talk about aviation advocacy, raising the next generation of aviation professionals. It's very important, as C.J. said, to replace ourselves as we move through the industry. I'm going to introduce the moderator of the panel and let her introduce her panel, but our moderator really needs no introduction. Jennifer Maples is currently an aviation superintendent with the city of Phoenix. She's been in the position now for about 9.5 years after spending another 10 years or 11 years doing multiple jobs all over the airport. She's got a BS in Aviation Business Administration from Embry-Riddle, but what's really, really cool is she's extremely active in S.W.I.E., and she currently sits on the board of examiners. So for all you guys that don't have your accreditation yet, she's kind of your gatekeeper. She's a good folks to know. So Jennifer, your panel.
Thank you. Whoa, okay. So first of all, first order of business, I would like to thank our sponsors. We all know that these conferences would not be possible without their continued support. And the sponsors of this session include Scottsdale Airport. Thank you, Mr. Mascaro. CSHQA and Atkins. So thank you all very much. Just for the record, I have no idea how we're supposed to follow that level of energy that CJ brought to the room, but we did have a lot of fun talking about S.W.I.E., and he spoke to several of us kind of preparing for his presentation, and the more I got into talking to him, the more excited I got because I was talking about S.W.I.E. I was talking about something that matters to me, something that I'm passionate about. And this topic, aviation advocacy, is also something I'm passionate about because it's our industry, this is what we do, and it's what we need to care about because it's our future. Tomorrow, as well as in the years in the future when we're all retired. So I don't know how many of you remember the different color differentiations, but I'm going to say you all deserve to be holding this, okay, because you're here, you're engaged. So right off the bat, you're already engaged. So congratulate yourselves for that. You're awesome. Yeah. Oh. And I got to give this back to CJ. He let me borrow it. All right. So I'm not going to introduce the panel in the traditional way. We are going to actually introduce ourselves by sharing a little bit about how we got into the industry. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about advocacy. Why do we even care? What is it? What does the word even mean? So here's the definition, okay, advocacy. You can read a couple of different versions of it, but what all comes down to is it's something that we care about, that we want to promote. And the words that CJ was using earlier today, motivation, purpose, that sort of stuff, it all comes down to that passion. So the what is advocacy? Okay, so it's supporting, it's trying to move forward a purpose, a cause. And why we do it is because we're passionate about it. But how do we do it? And this is where we talk about how do you get here. I encourage you all over the next couple of days to talk to each other and hear each other's stories. Share your story. How did you get involved in aviation? What was it that gave you the bug? I mean, we all jokingly say we love the smell of jet fuel in the morning, or you got jet fuel in your veins, or I was once called a propeller head, and I don't know that it was a compliment, but I took it that way, so I was all right with it. So how did you get here? So here's my story. I was born into it, quite literally. This photo was taken in 1970. I'm the little girl at the top of the stairs. My dad worked for North American Rockwell at LAX, and actually a couple years after that, he entered the airline industry and worked until he retired. He was with Hughes Air West, and then Republic, and then Northwest. So pretty much my entire life up through college was a non-rev. I flew all over the place. This was what I grew up with. Aviation was just a part of life. What it meant to me was, and what aviation represented to me was freedom. It was the ability to experience the world. That's what aviation meant to me. And so when I thought about what I wanted to do when I grew up, I wasn't really sure I was going to end up in airports. In fact, I thought I'd never end up in airports, but I just knew it was going to be in aviation because to me that was freedom and that was important to me. So really quickly, I am going to run through some statistics. Mr. McNamee, he was very generous and helpful in getting some of these slides. He actually moderated a session specifically about the pilot shortage that we're facing in our industry, and that was at the Houston conference. So people that are a lot smarter than us, would be the first ones to say, have been working on these statistics over the last several years to kind of paint the picture in terms of the pilot shortage and why the pilot shortage matters. Well, it's an indicator. It's an indicator in our industry, and it's going to trickle down. It's going to have ripple effects. In fact, it already has. So just briefly, I'll talk through these slides. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The steady reduction of pilots over the last 3 years, it's a little startling, and these are new pilots. Along the same time frame, if you look, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I was on the wrong slide. This one is new pilots since 1990, the last 25 years. 61% reduction in private pilots. That one is the most startling figure of all. Then, carrying it forward, just since 2009, in those same categories of private, commercial, and ATP, you'll see that over the last several years, an average of 30 pilots a day is how many we're losing from the industry. Now, this was provided, and by the way, let me give credit. The Regional Airline Association and UND, or the folks that were presenting at that session, they put these slides together. I do not want to take credit for this at all. This basically is a projection of what they think the hiring is going to be at the major airlines for pilots through the next 10 years. But if you look at this, this is the shortage that they're predicting. So I know I'm going through this really fast, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on statistics. I want to talk about some things that we can really, kind of sink our teeth into, and that's why is it going to impact airports? How is it going to impact airports? Well, a reduction in air service. If you don't have enough pilots, then you can't fly as many airplanes, and you have to make choices about your routes. So that translates to less competition, increase in commercial costs, and it goes on. You have less business travel, less leisure travel, less people coming through your airport, less PFCs, concession revenue, higher cost per enplanement, okay? It can affect us. In fact, this slide here really brought it home to me, and I was kind of thinking of how this translates. And that shows just over 3 years that 27 airports have lost scheduled service, and 222 of them have experienced a reduction in scheduled service. Now, I'm not saying that it's a direct correlation. Other factors come into play, but it is an indicator. And this is where advocacy comes in. So this is just the coolest thing ever. UND shared this. There's a student named Swain Martin, and he has begun advocating without even, I don't think, knowing that that's what he was doing. He was a UND student, and he began his own blog and started his own business. He's got his own YouTube channel with all of these subscribers, and he was only 19 years old. And UND has attributed to the Swain effect, basically. And here's just some of the comments, just to give you a picture of how much he's inspiring people, how much he's encouraging them to get involved in aviation. But this is the enrollment UND has seen as a result. It's significant, and that's one person, that's one kid who is basically advocating for aviation in this very small sector of the industry is having such an impact. So imagine if all of us at each of our airports had one Swain Martin, what we could do for the industry. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our next speaker, and that's Mitch Cooper. He's with Mead and Hunt, and he's going to tell us about efforts that are already underway to help equip airports to be advocates. Mitch?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. So, going with the theme here, I'm going to tell you my story and how I got here. But before I do that, just a little public speaking tip. If you ever want to get over presentation jitters, put a picture of yourself with a mullet and some missing teeth up in front when you're addressing the crowd, because that's a great way to do it. So this is me and my younger brother sitting in a Piper Pawnee that my grandfather was restoring in his backyard. I was born in New Zealand, as you can obviously tell by my accent. Moved to the US when I was 4, which is where my accent went. My grandfather was one of the first crop dusters in New Zealand, had his own business. Although he was no longer flying when I was born, his love for aviation stayed, and he used to restore aircraft. And so he and my uncle would always have bits of aircraft in the backyard, and they'd be working on it, and as a kid I used to play around in it. Also, I spent a lot of time in my younger life just kind of sitting at the end of a runway, back when you were still allowed to do that, watching airplanes come and go. And I've been known in my adult life to schedule long layovers at LAX so I can go to the In-N-Out and have a burger and watch the planes come and go, and seeing some of you probably have done that as well. So that's my story. I've been lucky enough to follow on through college and into a job where I get to continue to work in the aviation industry every day. What I'm presenting on today is the ACRP Project 134, which is Developing Innovative Strategies for Aviation Education and Participation. This project has not been started yet, and actually the nicest part about presenting about a project that it's not done yet, I am looking to all of you to give me ideas on what we can include in this research project. The way Mead and Hunt is involved is we helped develop the problem statement with ACRP, and where the project stands right now is ACRP is contracting with a selected consultant. So more to come on that, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail later on. The background of what this project is going to look at is the industry trends that are leading to the changes in the skills required and the shortages of labor all across the aviation industry. It's going to result in a guidebook, like many of the ACRP guidebooks that you're familiar with, and I'll go through a little bit about what each of those will include. And then I think we're going to hold questions until the end, but as I said, I'm going to be here for the next 2 days. I would really love to hear some of your ideas, so if you see me out there, please stop me and let me know. So a little bit of background about this project. ACRP and A.A.E were collaborating on these projects that they deemed important, and at the 2015 meeting, they did a vote on all of the topics that were under consideration. This particular topic was ranked highest out of the 5 that were chosen to become project statements out of all 17. The topic has evolved a little bit as we went through the process. It started off with a guidebook to support general aviation activity, but through the iterative process with NASAO and with ACRP at the meeting, they wanted to broaden the horizon, because it wasn't just general aviation or people flying planes that needed this topic. It was all aspects of aviation, from air traffic control, airport operations and management, mechanics, avionics. The whole industry needed a way to reach out and engage younger people to help strengthen that pipeline of workers in the future. So where we ultimately wound up when the problem statement was issued with ACRP is it is develop innovative strategies for aviation education and participation. And it is all about getting the word out about the exciting and challenging careers in all aspects of aviation. This slide may look very common to you. It's been relatively well circulated. It's produced by the Boeing Company. This shows the demand for new pilots and new technicians by regions across the world. The key takeaway here, and as Jennifer mentioned, people are retiring faster than they're being replaced. And that's just not sustainable, because aviation as a whole is a growing industry. So something needs to be done to address that looming shortage of skilled workers with an interest. So as I said, we're not just looking at pilots, but technicians, air traffic controllers, mechanics. The project panel that will be steering this includes some very talented individuals. Nod to my left here. Jennifer Maples serving as the project chair. But we also have representatives from across the board representing state boards, federal government, industry groups, research groups. So they will be guiding this process, working with the selected consultant on the project. The project has a 2-barreled approach. It's going to look at the emerging trends and technologies in aviation, and it's also going to look at the emerging trends and technologies in outreach and communication. How do we get the message out? You hear a lot about next gen and things like that, but how are we communicating that? Because the world is really changing with how you outreach, particularly to the younger generation. Putting something in a newsletter isn't necessarily the best way to reach everybody. So the guidebook will look into that. When it comes to aviation, we're going to look at things like, obviously, next-gen and airspace, how that impacts airports and flight procedures. We're going to look at unmanned aerial systems and unmanned aerial vehicles, how their integration into the airspace presents new challenges and opportunities, but also how the maintenance of these type of things presents new career opportunities for people. UAS, or if you think about an aircraft mechanic, they're still always going to be turning the wrench, but there are some sophisticated electronics on these aircraft, and the right training is key to keeping these aircraft flying and maintaining that level of safety that we all expect. When it comes to outreach and communication, there's the tried and true website outreach, newsletters, but some of the other things in social media going beyond just Facebook, but looking at, an example I'll use is Instagram. As Jennifer mentioned, student Swain has created quite a big following through Facebook and YouTube. On my personal experience, I know there are a lot of pilots and people who work at airports that have Instagram accounts that have quite a few followers, because aviation in general is wrapped up in travel, and that's something that appeals to a broad range of the population. And these people that are working out there are showing what they do every single day and really have created quite a wide audience, and it's getting people interested. So when the guidebook is ultimately produced, what it will cover is the aviation and the educational aspects. It'll include a list of resources for people who are using the guidebook where they can go for help as far as the industry organizations, educational organizations, and government agencies that can assist them with this. It'll also include case studies, and again, that's where hopefully I'm going to have some conversations with all of you as the days go on here about any ideas that you might have of something that would make a good case study. At the very end, it'll also include a template for outreach materials, so if you're an airport sponsor or a government, and you're looking for ways that you can engage people in your area, there'll be some ideas on how you can get started and a template for you to work with. Expected deliverables from this project will be, first and foremost, the traditional ACRP guidebook, which you can download or request a printed copy. But with some of the advances in the ACRP website, there's a consideration of how we can turn this into an interactive tool that's hosted online so that you don't have to worry about where the guidebook is. You can just go to the website and work from there. As I mentioned, this project has not been, the contract has not been awarded yet. The contractor has been selected, but because the contracting process is not finished, we can't disclose all of that. But we are expecting that the contracting will be completed in August 2016. And that's when the outreach and the case studies will start, moving into the end of this year and early 2017. We're hoping to get this out for industry review by winter of 2017 and complete the project in early 2018. So right now is really the greatest time for feedback and to get all of that. So I'm going to put my conversation or my email up here if you don't have a chance to catch up with me. Also, Stephanie Ward out of Mead & Lansing office is one of the principal leaders for the NASAO problem statement, and then Jennifer Maples as well, serving as the chair. So we look forward to your feedback and for any questions that you might have.
Our next speaker needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway, Mr. Bob Trimborn, and he's going to come up and share his story.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you all for being here today, and shout out to Carrie and all the work that she and her committee's been doing to make this a great conference, and last night turned out to be a great beginning, and so thank you for the opportunity. This interesting picture that you see before you is like, I'm 17 years old, brand new private pilot. I got my private license on my 17th birthday. I flew all of my relatives and good friends on that day. It was a great experience. But my history or my experience in aviation really begins back before I can even remember. I think the first memory I had was being on my dad's shoulders at Mines Field watching an air show, which is now LAX, and watching the new jets of those eras take off. And the inspiration of that and my father's passion for aviation bled into my life, and I can never remember a time I wasn't a passionate person for aviation. In fact, my mom's dad, he left Iowa during World War II with his 3 kids and his wife and came out to Southern California and went to work for North American building B-25s. After the war, he went to work for Northrop. My dad Went to work for Northrop. My grandfather helped with the flying wing program. My dad helped build the Mach 2 or Mach 1 T-38. So at a young age, when I was 14 years old, I went down to Hawthorne Airport, which was a mile away, with a $5 certificate in my hand from the Flying Magazine, and went on my very first airplane ride in the Cherokee 140 at Bates Aviation. I left that little experience, walked down the street to Rose Aviation with another $5 certificate to fly in Cessnas, and went for a ride in the Cessna 150. And I chose the Cessna route and started flying like crazy. Had over 150 hours when I soloed because I was so young. Soloed on my 16th birthday, private 17th birthday, commercial 18. So to me, aviation is literally, it's 80, 87, it's in my blood. You know, that's before 100 low-light existed. So anyway, I was on the path to be an airline captain. That's what I wanted to do. That was my whole passion in life. I was going to fly those big airliners. My dad went to work for Western Airlines. I used to walk to LAX, it was 3 miles away, sit with him. He was a sheet metal mechanic, ride the crew bus out to the airport or the terminals, go flying on the airlines, just riding jump seats all over the place. Had a great time. Building hours at the airport, became a chief pilot at Wright's Flying Service. And then one day the airport manager retired. And my dad said, you ought to throw your application in. I said, well, I don't know anything about airport management. He goes, well, you've been living at the airport for the last 20 years. Why don't you try it? So I threw my hat in the ring, and I must have said the right words, and my whole career went from being pilot-centric to airport management-centric. I became the airport manager at the airport I learned to fly at. So spent 30 years in the industry, bailed out of Santa Monica Airport after 17 years there, and I work for Aviation Management Consulting Group, trying to give back to the industry that I have so much passion for. And that's what I'm going to speak about today, is how do we instill the passion of aviation into the new generation? When you look back at the history of pilots and you know, how it all really began, there was hardly any private pilots until World War II. It was a very small group of people that flew, and there was even a smaller group of people that ran airports. But then World War II hit, and bingo, they needed pilots. And so they started training pilots by the thousands. And we know what happened after the war. All those guys came back. They all wanted to keep flying. There was a hell of a lot of DC-3s around, so suddenly we had the airline industry just explode on the scene. So that was chugging along. Then the Korean War happened, and more pilots were generated. Vietnam happened, and more pilots were generated. And then suddenly that impetus, that pipeline of pilots entering the industry dried up. After Vietnam, there was no big push for more pilots. There's more than they ever needed in the military. So we have this huge pilot population, basically all driven by the military and their needs. And they were the silence, which became the boomers, so to speak. And now we have this huge population of pilots, and that driver is now gone. The military isn't creating a lot of pilots anymore. And so we're seeing an industry of pilots starting to collapse. And I think it's collapsing down to what I call sustainable, maybe if that's the right word or not, I don't know. But we need to start encouraging the younger generation to get into the passion of aviation. This is a whole new concept because, again, the military used to drive the number of pilots come into the scene. That's not happening anymore. So we need to figure out a way to get these kids to think about flying, to think about aviation management, to think about being aircraft mechanics when all they want to do is get on their Facebook page or get on their PDAs and they're engaged in the social world. We need to show them there's a lot of fun out there in doing what we do in this industry. So again, here I am. I'm working for aviation management. The problem is, again, the shortage of the pilots on the horizon. Our GA fleet is shrinking and aging. The cost of flying is continuing to grow. And how do we, again, bridge this next generation, and how do we inspire these folks to get involved? The gap, you know, I'm a boomer. You know, I'll be 65 in August. I never thought I'd get this far in life, so to speak, but it's looming on the horizon. I will be 65. I have to live with that. But I grew up being inspired by my dad and my parents, so to speak, and I lived to work. I lived to work in the airport management world. I lived to work as a flight instructor. But the new millennials, they work to live, as we heard this morning. There's a whole different paradigm here that we have to come to grips with. And here's the perception of airports to a lot of these younger generations. They're tedious waiting rooms. You struggle to get through TSA at a major airport. You get out of TSA, you get to the terminal, it's packed. Then you get on the airplane, and it's another waiting room, right? And all you want to do is plug in your headset, listen to your music. Can't wait to get to the other end. The magic of getting there is lost on them. They don't realize they're going Mach 1 at 40,000 feet, and it's 80 below zero outside in a lap of luxury. It's just a waiting room. And how do you overcome that perception? And it's only going to get worse. It isn't going to get any better. And so we have to figure out a way. And a way to do that is to advocate. And again, why do we advocate? Because the old saying is, if we don't do it, no one else will. And because they look to the people in our industry, the airport managers and directors, we're the guys at the airport. Well, the airport, a GA airport, is one of the most misunderstood things in a community. I ran Santa Monica Airport for 17 years, right? One of the most busiest general aviation airports around, 18,000 jet operations, just an amazing place. But guess what? I'd run into people in this 5.5 square mile town who didn't even know there was an airport there. Yeah, how does that happen? The airplanes are coming and going nonstop, and people don't even know it's there. And when you say, what's a GA airport? They go, I don't know. I don't know what that is. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we teach people what we do in industry? And it's really not just about GA airports, it's about all the airports. Again, what's at the airport? The waiting room. Waiting room to get on the airplane. No, it's more than that. And that's how we need to approach this issue, is through advocacy. We need to help generate the excitement through that program. So I'm going to kind of talk about how we do an advocacy program. To a lot of you, you'll find this an intuitive presentation, but to some of the new people, the new millennials, so to speak, this might be helpful. So again, why do we advocate? We need to build those relationships. We need to get those people to understand who we are and what we do. And we use it to inspire and influence people. We can use it to really outreach and make people excited about the world of aviation. But it's all about communicating effectively, interacting professionally, and establishing and nurturing and maintaining relationships. From the youngest kid on the view deck who's 5 years old up to the 85-year-old retiree who just comes to the airport to watch the airplanes take off and land. You build those relationships, they last for a long time, and they help you in the airport. It can be comprehensive in nature. You can look at an advocacy program covering everything at the airport. You can generate this whole thing that looks at advocating for a project, a new runway project, or advocating for a new terminal building. Or it can be the Young Eagles program, advocating for kids coming out to the airport to get in the seats of those airplanes and experience flying for the first time, or again, keeping your control tower open. But it's all about communicating in an effective way. So how do you create and establish a successful advocacy program? Well, that's what we're going to go over right now. It takes time and it takes a deliberate energy. You have to really want to do this. You have to step up to the plate. You have to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and start the process. You have to look at the program as yielding results. You have to develop a goal. And it's important to, again, leverage all those new communication tools. When I first got into the business of airport management, I had a Selectric typewriter, I had a pad of paper, and a 4-line telephone, right? That was my social media, right? The throwaway newspaper was what the airport was in, right? Now it's not that at all, and we all know that. So we have to be proactive in our advocacy presentations. We don't want to be reactive to the program. We want to set the stage. We want to set the tone of the advocacy program. We want to lead and inspire. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to end up with this. This is actually a picture of a group of folks that were at the corner of my airport. That's the actual name, Concerned Residents Against Airport Pollution. They were demanding that the airport stop selling 100 low-lead because the fuel was killing their babies and the emissions from the airport was killing off the neighborhood east of the airport. And so they come out and they demonstrate periodically. And it was because You know, as hard as I could try and advocate for the airport, the harder I advocated, people would say, well, you're only in it for the airplanes and the pilots in the aviation world. So I had to balance the advocacy against this backdrop. So it can be an interesting concept, developing the program. You have to look at the set and sight in your airport to be effective. But it's got to be a focused program. Again, it doesn't have to be really complex, but it has to be focused on what you're doing and maintain that focus. And again, results oriented. So you need an advocate, and that's what you guys need to step up to the plate and be. The airport managers need to be an advocate. You have to have excellent interactive skills with the community at all levels. You should be a visionary, solution-oriented, a passionate spokesperson without a doubt, and clearly understand the airport's mission, vision, and value within the community. And that's an important thing. You really need to understand the role of the airport. And cultivating the advocacy leadership role is a continuous process. Once you start, you should not stop. They look to you to be the guy out in front. You can't do it alone either. You have to have other people engaged in the process. So you need to create, to me, it's important to create a stakeholder working group. And that stakeholder group needs to be a whole bunch of folks that are stakeholders at your airport. From again, the guy that's 70 years old, has been in aviation forever, and the new kids on the block that can come in and bring in that passion and that understanding of the new social media and what that can bring to the party, so to speak. And they will eventually become your advocates. They can help you promote the airport, help you promote aviation to the next generation. So again, we have to come back to the mission, vision, and value of the airport. If they don't exist, the mission statement, the vision statement, or the value statement, you need to kind of put those together. It's really important to understand those to make an advocacy program work. You also need to do a SWOT analysis of the airport. What's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the airport? And you can also use the same concept for pilots and the aviation, let's say, flight training at your airport. What's the strengths that the airport has in this arena? What's the weaknesses? What are the opportunities to get more flight training or more kids involved in this, and the threats? What's looming on the horizon or what exists today that could be a detriment to your advocacy program, so you can address those issues while you're building your program. But the goals of the initiatives need to be realistic and attainable. You don't want to say we're going to have 10,000 new pilots flying at Hawthorne Airport in your 2017. You have to look at this thing as an incremental basis, but it has to be realistic. It has to be attainable. And you want to start out with the goal of basically of doing things that really improves the airport. Like how about putting the airport or the road underneath the runway instead of over the top of the runway? So who knows where this picture is or what airport this is a picture of? Isn't it amazing? This is a very recent picture. And it still exists today. Talk about security at an airport. So perceptions versus reality, truth or consequences. And what this means is a lot of people have a perception of what your airport is that's not based in reality. And that's where you have to have truth when you deal with people and develop the advocacy program, because if you try and, quote, lie or misstate the facts, you will pay the consequences of that. So you need to be honest and upfront in developing the program. The message is the goal. It conveys the value of the airport. It has to be focused, unambiguous, and sincere. It should be identifying key stakeholders, developing the message, emphasizing the benefits to the stakeholders, in this case, bridging to this next generation, and developing documents and leave behinds. Sometimes the hard copy is some of the better stuff you can have out there, but it also needs to be available in new modern digital communication formats. You need to develop good tactics on how to achieve the goals of your advocacy program. It's important to choose those tactics and identify those that are the most successful, that will lead to the best outcome that you're selected. And again, back to this communications toolbox. As a 65-year-old old fart standing up here, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. I don't do Facebook, my wife does. My kids they grew up in it. I don't know how to do that very well, so I look to others to do it. But it's important that we understand and deal with this, because this is the modern world that we live in. I mean, just watching the last Republican convention, the communication tools that they employed were just insane, and how they crafted the message was just amazing. But to me, the website still is the king as far as social media is concerned. In my book, I think it sets the platform for your communications concepts and initiatives. It needs to be relevant, current, and accurate. I bullet point all these up here, but it's important to keep that website up to date and current. And I think it's important to become very good at doing this so it doesn't become stable or stale. Again, the communication strategies, all these things are in your toolbox. You need to how to effectively use these in your advocacy program. And again, in conclusion, you would enhance the value and understanding of aviation and airports within the community and the new generation that's coming up. Your advocacy program needs to have tangible results for the betterment of the airport and aviation and the community. It needs to engage in effective communication with stakeholder groups. They could be the good ones and the bad ones, but you have to engage them, and strengthen the relationships, and create a mechanism of introducing aviation airports to your next generation in a meaningful way. So here's the team. This is the goal, to have an advocacy team that wants to stand up there en masse and advocate for your airport. I know this is maybe not attainable, but it is a good goal. And here's your desired results: the new generation of pilots entering the fleet, the new airport management coming up through the industry. I want to just say thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you.
Okay, so we have a few minutes for questions. One of the things I forgot to mention earlier is I just realized all speakers at these conferences should have their own theme music. I thought that was really cool how CJ had, and I would totally have a song. So I think next time I'm going to do that. So anyway, do we have any questions from the audience? Really? We've told you everything you need to know to advocate? Yes, Mr. Makovsky.
My question is,
Got a microphone coming.
my question is, airports, by and large, are parts of government entities, and so as we talk about how do we motivate and engage the millennials and try to mold our organization to kind of meet their needs so they enjoy coming to work every day. Many airports have challenges being a part of a bigger government bureaucracy, if you will, and it's a little bit more difficult to do that than perhaps the private sector. And so I just wondered if the panel had any thoughts about ways that we can potentially do that paradigm shift, if you will, to accommodate the new generation.
So I'll just, before Bob and Mitch jump in, one of the things I want to mention is the ACRP project that Mitch was talking about. That guidebook is going to be geared towards 10 to 25-year-olds. It's specifically going to be targeting the folks that are younger to get them engaged earlier. And that's one of the questions they're trying to answer is exactly that. How do we do that before they even walk in the door and start working at an airport? Recognizing, like in our sharing of our stories, that it was there before we just got a job at an airport. But I defer to our experts on the panel.
Sure. And I think I would echo what Jennifer said. Probably just to use an example of a project that I'm working on now, and I'll spare the name to spare the innocent of where I'm working. They are an airport in a government organization faced with a challenge of a lot of competition. They're in a congested metropolitan area, and part of it goes back to educating the organization that they sit within that unlike roads and other things that a government typically provides, airports, particularly GA airports in the metro area, are in competition with each other, and you have to think about it a little bit differently, a little bit more like a business, and be a bit more nimble to respond. So it goes a little bit with upstream education and setting the stage for the world that you're playing in versus some of the other municipal departments or county departments.
I think that's one of the more difficult things to do within the organization is to truly educate them on the importance of the facility within their organization. More than once I got very frustrated at Santa Monica, so to speak. I'll speak to that. that the organization really didn't see the importance of the airport at all. It was more of a noisemaker and a nuisance maker than a fixture within the national air transportation system. So that's a good challenge for you.
Yes, Stacy.
I'd like to kind of help answer that question. One of the things that I'm engaged in on a personal level, even before I went to work for AOPA and now NBAA, was educating youth and getting them interested in aviation. And I've really seen over the last 20 years a huge change in how these young students who come into these aviation programs are prepared and interested in aviation. When I first learned to fly, the history of aviation was fascinating to me. These kids don't care that much about what happened. Eventually, when they get involved, they start to care. They become curious. But right now, they want to know, how do I do it now? Where is this going? How does this make my life better? Why should I choose this career? And you have to, just like the previous presentation, motivate them in those ways that he suggested. Every airport has an opportunity to get engaged with their community and their schools. Reach out to your schools or let the schools know that you're willing to do tours for the students. There are Girl Scouts and Boy Scout groups. That's where I'm really reaching out, is to the Girl Scouts to help get them interested. Starting right at the Brownie level, the little kids. You can call your Girl Scout headquarters, your local Boy Scout headquarters, and let them know that you are open to tours. And next thing you know, you'll start getting calls from troop leaders who are looking for activities, something for their kids to do. You can come up with kind of a little canned program at your airport and engage the different parts of your airport. If you have a flight school on the airport, be sure and let them know what you're doing. Be sure and take them by there, take them to the maintenance shop as part of that tour. So get your tenants involved at the airport as part of that education program. As I said, the troop leader's going to start calling you. You can also, and you need to sort of create a progressive program, because what you do with kids when they were 8 and 9 and 10 years old is a lot different from what you're going to do with the kids who are 14 and 15 years old who are coming. If you have a school on your airport, they probably have some simulators. Those kids get really interested in simulators. We were discouraged a while back from using the FAA air traffic control tower as part of the program, but nowadays, if you have a tower on your airport, you can arrange for tours in that tower. Ask them how they want it done and what's the best time of day to do it and so forth. And you can take these small groups up to the tower, and you can get the tower people to come in and talk to the kids. Most of the flight schools will have some kind of a classroom or educational space if you don't have a conference room big enough to accommodate them. Civil Air Patrol is a great way. Bring those people into this program and get the kids started. And as I said, take a kind of a progressive approach depending on what the age of the kids are. I'm glad to help with you, and I'm so excited about this guidebook that's coming out. So let me know if I can offer any additional suggestions, things that you can do personally and engage your staff in doing personally, that you don't have to get involved with higher levels of government. And Todd did a great thing. He brought his congresswoman into his airport and invited all these different representative organizations like NBAA and the Civil Air Patrol and the local flight school and all these folks into the room, and that congressman basically congresswoman held a field hearing basically at his airport, and all of these interested parties were able to come in and talk to that congressperson about how FAA reauthorization would affect their industry, what was the pilot shortage, how that was affecting their industry, and what Congress can do, or what they had done to help create this shortage and ways to get beyond it and so forth. And I just really appreciate what he did there, and I think there are a lot of airports who could do very similar things. Thanks.
So I think I missed the boat here. I totally should have had Stacy on my panel here. Actually, I'm going to take credit. I'm going to say she was a plant in the audience. But no, seriously, in all sincerity, what you've just said just demonstrates that passion that we've been talking about. And I think, honestly, Chad, that's where it starts. That's where it's got to start. At any level, with whatever, challenges we may face, if we've got that passion, and we remember our roots, and we remember that we want to bring others along, it's a place to start. So with that, I know it's lunchtime. I need to find out if there are any housekeeping announcements. I know we do get back here at 1 o'clock for our next session. James, Carrie, anybody, any announcements? Gladys? Okay. Lunch on your own, best places. I know they have several restaurants throughout the casino, but I don't have any particular names, but they're all throughout the casino.
Pizza place is good.
Okay, I guess then
So
we're
is
just
Mexican
back here
place.
at 1 o'clock. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much.